Hi everyone, and welcome to A Stitch in Time. Today is Wednesday, May 17th, 2023, and this is episode 254. My name is Carol, my Ravelry name is Knits and Pearls, and I live east of Vancouver in the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, Canada. I hope you're all doing well and that you've had a good couple of weeks since we last spoke. I fully intended to record last week. I swear I did. But life threw me a bit of a curveball in the form of COVID-19. Wasn't she kind? So unfortunately, last week I was too sick to record. Fortunately, however, for the most part, I was not too sick to knit. So when I wasn't sleeping or reading, I was knitting up a storm. And as a result, I have lots of things to show you this week. So I think it's going to be a bit of a long one. You better make yourself comfortable and grab yourself something to drink. We've been experiencing some summer-like weather here, so today I've got something cold to drink, a little Coke Zero and ice. So I'll have a little sip, wet my whistle, and let's get into things. Before I show you what I've been working on, I just want to remind you there are a couple of make-alongs taking place in the Ravelry group. A year-long chatter thread called Another Year of Stash, and a monthly make-along called the Yarn of the Month Club. I hope you will consider joining in. Just come on by the A Stitch in Time podcast Ravelry group. Read the first post in each of the pertinent threads, and that will tell you everything you need to know to participate. I would like to thank all of you who have been taking part so far this year, especially during my long and frequent absences. I'm so pleased that you just keep chattering along and showing off your wonderful projects. I was really hoping to sort of catch up now that our kitchen reno is all finished, but I find myself another week behind in many things. So thank you so much for just carrying on without me. I'm hoping to catch up again soon. I feel like that's something I say every episode, but it's just the way this year has been. All right, before I show you some works in progress, I have a finished project to share this week. You may have noticed I am wearing my Cullum tee. I finished it up, I think, a day or two after I last recorded, and I am super happy with it. So before I sat down to record this segment of the podcast, I recorded a little show and tell. So I'm going to insert that here. This is Cullum by Isabel Kramer. She designed this sweater for Quince & Company using Sparrow, which is their 100% linen fingering weight yarn. But I knit mine using Sweet Georgia Yarns Flaxen Silk Fine in the Cauldron colorway. It's also a fingering weight yarn, but it's comprised of 65% silk and 35% linen. I'd been drawn to this pattern for several years, and I'm so happy to have finally knit it. I think it's just the perfect, simple, classic, warm weather sweater, and I just love how it turned out. I even was a copycat and knit it in the same color as the original sample, but I think that's one of the things that drew me to it in the first place. As you can see, it's just a very simple capped sleeved sweater. It's knit straight from underarm to hem. Hopefully you can see there's a little bit of lace eyelet detail at the bottom hem on the front. And I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see it, but there is kind of a faux seam that is created with ribbing that runs down each side. So there it is from the front. And then there it is from the back. It is just completely plain stockinette on the back. That same ribbing detail also appears along the sleeve edges, and then there you can see that really nice lace pattern that runs along the top. So I'm going to step back a little bit and crouch so you can see me. I am wearing a black camisole under this. And while it does add a little bit of warmth to this sweater, the fabric is very light and airy and see-through, so it needs something underneath. And I also think the camisole kind of helps to smooth your body and allow the fabric to kind of skim over the camisole, gives a nice flattering, loose line. So, like I mentioned, I did use a different yarn than suggested. And while originally I thought I had gotten gauge using a 3mm needle, the pattern calls for 3.5mm. Once I started knitting it, I realized that my fabric was quite a bit looser than the suggested gauge. But I liked that light, loose fabric, and so I decided rather than trying to achieve a smaller gauge with the yarn, I would go down in size in the pattern. And so I ended up knitting the smallest size, which is supposed to be 34 3/4 inches finished. Mine is about 38 inches finished to fit my approximate 36-inch bust. So I have approximately 2 inches of positive ease, where the original sample had about 2 3/4 inches of positive ease. I tend to prefer a more close-fitting sweater, so I actually think that's a perfect amount of ease for my liking. As for modifications, I think the only modification I made other than changing the yarn was I made two. One was, rather than casting on along the shoulder edges as instructed, I did a provisional cast on. I used Judy's Magic cast on, and so while I worked on the back sections, I put the stitches on hold, just on a stitch holder, so when it came time to picking up the front and working down, I just had to start working on those stitches. And so I don't have any visible seam on the top of my shoulder. Now, I would not necessarily recommend this for a heavier yarn because I think you need that stability of a cast on edge, but this is so light and airy, I don't think it's going to put any stress on those shoulders. I only used 139 grams to knit the whole thing. Another modification I made, as I mentioned, there's a little bit of ribbing detail along each of the sleeve edges, and what I ended up doing is slipping the first stitch to give it a little bit of a smoother edge. Not sure how well you'll be able to tell, but I just liked the way that looked better than how I had done it originally, which was to start with a knit stitch or purl stitch, depending on which side of the fabric I was working on. I felt pretty good about my skeins. They looked very well matched. But out of caution, I ended up doing some helical knitting once I joined the body in the round. So I knit from one skein on the front and another skein on the back, and then when I joined it in the round, I used both skeins, alternating rows. Actually, I didn't do helical knitting. I changed my yarns along one side. That's right. Honestly, I think I could have gotten away with just knitting with one skein of yarn until I'd run out, but I didn't want to take that chance because if you've ever worked with hand-dyed yarns, I know many of you have, you can really run into the issue of having a really visible line where you change skeins. And so I didn't want that to happen, especially because this is all just solid stockinette. I thought it would be very obvious if I did that. And I think I might have made the body a little bit longer than called for. That's not unusual for me. I have a long torso, so I have a feeling I probably added about an inch, but I'm not even sure. I just kept knitting, and then I would try it on and got to the point where I thought it was the right length, and then added the lace, did the hem. So I think that's about all I have to say about that. So once again, Column Tea by Isabel Kramer. I would definitely recommend this pattern. It was well written, easy to follow, and very easy to knit. All right, works in progress. I have a lot of socks on the go. I'm not quite sure how it happened, but I currently have 4 sock whips, which is something I used to do all the time years ago. It's not something I tend to do too much anymore. I usually only have a couple. But yes, 4 it is. So let's start talking about them. You will have seen the beginnings of my Gauge Dye Works socks last episode. This is Gauge Dye Works Merino Twist Fingering in the classic stripes, and the colorway is called Whiskey in a Teacup. And I think last week I was 1 stripe repeat in. This week I have 2 socks that look like this. I am now ready for the heels. So this is my usual 64 stitch top down vanilla sock. It's a 2x2 rib on a 2.0 millimeter needle, and yeah, just plain knitting after the rib. I am going to do a traditional heel flap and gusset in this coordinating yarn. It came as part of this skein of yarn. It was dyed on one end of the skein, and so I'm going to do, yeah, coordinating heels for sure, maybe toes. I haven't decided yet, but I continue to love how this yarn is working up. It's a colorway I've been after for a long time, and I'm so thrilled to finally have it. I noticed when I put these socks on the sock blocker, they feel a little bit loose. I think I was quite relaxed while I was working on them, especially this part, which I was doing yesterday as some car knitting. I'll tell you more about that later. And so I'm hoping they're not going to be too loose once they're all done, but I'm going to love them anyway. I'm very happy. So yes, I do have 2 that look exactly like this, but I didn't think I needed to put them both on sock blockers or show them to you because I have quite a bit of things in front of me as it is. So I'm going to kind of tidy up a little bit as I go and take this off my sock blocker and tuck it away in its bag. This is a bag that I made for myself. I love it, with the little sheep that are knitting the beautiful flowers. Isn't that fun? I found that fabric in a quilt shop on Granville Island down in Vancouver. I think it was maybe around Christmas time. I can't remember. Anyway, I love it. All right, sock number 2 you have also seen. So this is the Clupea or Clupea sock by Very Busy Monkey. And I'm knitting this from Artful Bell in the rabbit hole colorway. And I am doing a coordinating heel out of the same yarn in the Cabernet colorway, which is very dark burgundy color. Not sure how well that's showing up. And they call their little minis Tiny Bell. So I had purchased this yarn from Beehive Wool Shop in Victoria online quite a while ago, and I put this skein aside as one of my skeins for my personal sock yarn club. So last year I did a personal sock yarn club make along in the group, and while I'm carrying on with the Yarn of the Month Club instead this year, I did set aside 12 skeins of yarn for socks for myself this year. And so, as I talked about last episode, I was really excited when I chose this one last week or a couple weeks ago. But it knit up differently than I was expecting. And I wasn't thrilled with how it was knitting up as a plain vanilla sock on a 2mm, say that 5 times fast. I can't even say it 1 time slow. A 2mm needle. I tried my usual 64 stitch plain vanilla sock. It just pooled in the most weird way. It was like this plummy color, burgundy color all on one side of the sock and gold on the other. And so what I eventually found is that if I knit it at 72 stitches on a 2mm needle using this Clupea pattern, it actually knit up really nicely. And so last week though I said, I'm not sure about this pattern, I'm not sure I want to knit it. And in the end, for a variety of reasons, I just kept knitting on that sock and determined that maybe that's just what the yarn wanted to be. And so I have to say that as I've carried on with it, I am really happy with how it's turning out, and I think I will like these socks after all. So if you look here, that's kind of how I was thinking and hoping the yarn would knit up, but it wanted to knit up in wider spirally stripes. It didn't want a micro stripe or be kind of all over variegated the way I wanted it to. And I kept trying to find a way to make it do what I wanted it to do, and that's not how the yarn was designed to be knit up. It's as simple as that. And so I've come to terms with that. You can see there too. And yeah, so I'm much happier. So yeah, as mentioned, this is a 72 stitch sock on a 2mm needle. This is the medium size. It's by Very Busy Monkey. I think I did mention that too. And she does recommend that you might want to size up from your usual, because this chevron pattern does make for a tighter fitting sock. So last week I mentioned that I thought that the leg might be a little bit too tight, but actually it's working out just fine. So I did do a coordinating traditional heel flap and gusset as the pattern calls for. It doesn't call for a coordinating one, but it does call for a heel flap and gusset. And I don't even mind sort of how the yarn knit up in the gusset area, although it did alter from its usual striping pattern. It's not, sometimes you have some really ugly pooling in this area when you stop doing your leg pattern, but in this case I don't mind how the yarn's behaving, and so I'm happy to just carry on and finish up these socks. So I'm going to bring that a little bit closer. Hopefully you can see the colors in that yarn. I thought about recording in my kitchen again. Once I started editing, I realized the light was not as bad as it appeared to be while I was recording. But just with the time of day and things, I was finding one side of myself was in shadow, and it just didn't really work. You can probably hear the garbage truck across the street. It's garbage day here today. So anyway, yes, I am much happier with these socks this week. I think it was just a matter of resigning myself to the fact that the yarn was not going to do what I wanted it to do. And that can be hard to, that can be hard sometimes, because when you visualize a yarn in the skein, or in the cake and you think about how you want it to look, it can be disappointing when it doesn't knit up how you want it to. I am keeping this project in my Very Busy Monkey project bag that I received as a prize a long time ago when I took part in a Very Busy Monkey make-along. I have taken part in many Very Busy make-along over the years, but none lately, which is a shame. It's a nice, friendly group. I've always enjoyed being part of it. Those socks will be, speaking of make-alongs, will not only be part of my another year of stash, I will also be entering them as part of the Soy Mel, which is the Stop Shooting on Yourself Mel that is being hosted by Lisa of Fiber Nymph Dye Works in the Fiber Nymph Dye Works Ravelry group. Another wonderful, friendly, welcoming group. Highly recommend taking part if you aren't already. Okay, sock number 3. So as I mentioned last week, I had purchased the Handmade Sock Society for this year, and that is by Helen Stewart of Curious Handmade. She puts out 6 patterns, releases one a month for 6 months, and has a make-along that takes place in her Ravelry group also. And I think also on Instagram, but don't quote me on that, because even though I have an Instagram account, I don't really do Instagram. Anyway, I had sort of hummed and hawed about whether or not I was going to participate, because I already had a lot of knitting planned, but then it's hard to beat the price when she has that early bird price for that collection, and I thought even if I don't knit them all right away, that's okay. Well, of course, I couldn't resist casting on right away anyway, and this is, I'm going to put it over on this side, I think the light's better. This is the beginnings of my shadow box socks. Her theme for this year is like curiosity cabinets, and so this is let's see if I can come in close. It's a very simple rib and lace pattern. I am using this lovely yarn by Impulse of Delight, who is very sadly no longer dyeing. This is a skein that's one of my few left over Impulse of Delight skeins that I have been treasuring. So Impulse of Delight. This is the Mere Sock, which is a wool cashmere nylon blend, 80-20-10. And this is the Meltwater colorway. And what the dyer used to do is she would have a photograph and then dye the yarn inspired by the photograph. So I thought Meltwater was a great colorway for this time of year because the spring melt is taking place. We've had some very warm weather. There's been some flooding in some areas of BC, including the small town that is just south of where my mom lives. They are down to single lane traffic through town after being shut completely down for a few days because half the road washed away. But yeah, things are being repaired. Anyway, this is another case where well, in the case of my Clupea socks, I'm going to have to look up how to actually say that word and what it exactly means. It might even say in the pattern, I don't remember. Anyway, in that case, I was trying to take the yarn and find a pattern to work with the yarn. in this case, I was trying to find a yarn that worked with this pattern. And I actually did try my rabbit hole yarn with this pattern. It didn't want to be this pattern either. And I realized what I really needed with this pattern was a yarn that didn't do a lot of pooling, or it would work with a regular stripe, I think, but I was trying it with a yarn that does kind of micro stripe, and it was not really working with that either. But I found this one, and I think it works quite well. This yarn, while it does have a little bit of pooling that takes place, is dyed in such a way that there are never any huge, big areas of pooling. That was one of the things I liked about this dyer's work. Beautiful colors and just a really nice dyeing technique. So this is a 64 stitch sock. I am knitting it on a 2mm needle also, and I did the traditional heel flap and gusset as suggested. I think I changed where I split for the heel. I did a few more rows. I think she ended kind of mid-pattern. I ended with the yarn over lace row, just because it was the length that I wanted the sock to be. But I like how those are working up so far also. Let me slide these off the sock blocker and put them away. So these are living in my sock bag that I made for myself. This is one I kept for myself. I did some as prizes, but I had to do one string in one color and one in another because I didn't have enough of both. But I don't mind, and I really like this one. Finally, I have another pair of plain vanilla socks, and this sock was the result of one of my attempts at the shadow box socks. This is a yarn from Lichen and Lace. It is the matte sock in the pressed flowers colorway. Now I would show you the label, but it's all faded. I have a price sticker on here from 88 Stitches in Langley, which sadly is no longer in existence. It was one of my favorite LYSs. I thought I had bought this yarn at Knit City in Vancouver, but I think what it was is I almost bought this yarn at Knit City in Vancouver and then didn't, and then regretted it. So when I saw it again at 88 Stitches, I bought it. So I tried this yarn as the shadow box socks. You can see the 1x1 twisted rib, but it didn't want to be that pattern. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't wonderful. And rather than ripping it all out, I thought I would see how this yarn looked in stockinette stitch. And it turned out this yarn wanted to be stockinette stitch. I think it looks very pretty. Just, you can see kind of a beigey background, and then there's all these colors in it, mostly purple and orange and red and blue. A little bit of green now and then. And so I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna keep going with this. There's no timeline, but I did want to rip it all out. I thought, well, let's just see how it looks in stockinette rather than rip out the whole thing. And I'm glad that I did, because I think it's pretty. I am going to do a coordinating or contrasting short row heel. Haven't picked a yarn yet. Thinking either the red or the purple. I think that'll look really nice. So these are, yeah, just whenever I feel like working on a plain stockinette socks. No timeline, and it's also quite deep stash because I think it was Knit City maybe 2019. Is that when I went? So it's been in my stash for a long time. So again, I'm going to put these away right away, and in this case I'm putting in my sock your drawer bag that I got from Tolt Yarns and Wool down in Carnation, Washington. Love that store. Only been in there once, but oh, love it. It's a beautiful shop. And finally, I better take a sip before I carry on. My throat's a little bit sore here. Last week, I showed you some beautiful yarn that I was going to use for my yarn of the month. It's these two skeins from Ching Fiber, and I just dropped one of the labels. This is Merino Singles. This is Kid Mohair Silk, and they are both in the Dew colorway, D-E-W, like morning dew. And I don't know how well the colors are picking up. As you can see, it's very soft and pastel-y, kind of watercolored. It's pale green. There's almost a pale rose petal pink, and also a very, very pale kind of lavender lilac-y color in here. But it's very, very soft, as you can see. There's also kind of a creamy color that goes through them. And I showed you that I fell in love with this Ondas or Ondas blouse by Valentina Bogdanova. I thought I knew how to say it, and then not so sure. That is the beautiful lace yoke. I think she said in the description that ondas means waves, I think, in Portuguese. Yes, waves in Portuguese. And here are another couple of pictures of this sweater. I just think it's so beautiful and soft and romantic. And I just couldn't resist trying to knit it. The only thing is I only have one skein of each yarn. And the pattern calls for 2 skeins of the mohair silk. So my hope is that I will have enough to do the body and do something with the sleeves, maybe just a little bit that I can knit a very short sleeve, or if necessary, just do a little bit of a ribbed hem on the sleeve with the merino single. So let me show you this beautiful, beautiful sweater. I did steam the yoke a little bit, so it's not quite as crinkly as, you know how lace is. Until you block it, it doesn't really lie properly. Just, there are no words. It's gorgeous. It is so gorgeous. So, and then you can see there's a little bit more mohair on this side because you did some short rows after the yoke. See how soft and beautiful that is? Soft as in colors. I mean, it's soft in fabric too. But the colors are just so soft. So, let's talk about this a little bit. The pattern, let me refresh my memory. The pattern calls for more ease than I prefer. Let me see what it says here. So the second size is the one that's most suitable for my bust measurement, but they recommend, let me see here. The pattern's written with an extra 8.75 to 9.25 inches of positive ease. And that's just way, way more ease than I like in a sweater. And so what I'm doing is I'm knitting the first size, which is made for a 30-inch bust rather than a 36-inch bust. And so I should end up with, they say, about 9 inches of positive ease. I'm not sure exactly if that's what I'm going to have or not. Yeah, they say it's going to be 39. Sorry, let me rephrase that. The finished measurement is supposed to be 39 inches, which will give me about 3 inches of positive ease. That makes more sense. It was a little bit difficult to swatch for. The only gauge you have is for plain stockinette with the mohair. And I tried, I can't remember what I tried for when knitting a swatch, and I didn't want to use up too much yarn because it's precious. I only have so much. In the end, what I ended up doing is using the recommended needles, which is not usual for me, but it called for a 2mm needle for the top part, and then you switch to a 3mm needle for the lace work and the mohair, and it seems to be working out really well. I will say that it was very difficult knitting this lace pattern on a 2mm needle. It is a fingering weight yarn, so I guess it's just like knitting a sock, but I just, with the lace work and stuff, I found it a little bit challenging. You can see each lace repeat ends with this little stripe of mohair. Look at that. Look at that. It's gorgeous. So I was concerned also about the depth of the yoke. If you've watched for a while, you know that's kind of an ongoing thing with me. I think I tend to maybe be either a little bit less deep from neck to underarm, or else I just don't like my yoked sweaters to be as deep as some people make them. And so it did say you could do there are 4 charts, and it says you can do like just to chart 3 if you want a shallower yoke, or chart 4 like the pattern did. And when I looked at the measurements on the finished measurements for the 4 charts, I thought the yoke would be too long. And so I kind of kept checking it as I went, and as best as I could, considering it wasn't fully blocked. And I thought if I divided for the sleeves just a little bit early, rather than do the mohair garter stitch and then some increasing and some stocking stitch before dividing, I decided to divide on the first row of the mohair garter stitch. And I did all that, and I did all the garter stitch, incorporating the increases that I needed. But then when I tried it on, I thought, you know, this is probably fine, but I also didn't think it would hurt to do the extra rows, and I thought it might be easier just to work it as the pattern says. And so I one by one, unpicked, 340 stitches, I think, on 4 rows of mohair, and then went back to the last row of the lace, and then I re-knit it as written. And I've since, like I said, steamed it. I've put it on 2 needles, and I think it's gonna fit just fine. So I thought maybe what I would do, since I've got a cami on under this sweater anyway, is just slip this on so you can see it for yourself. So I'll be right back. I've moved the camera back just a little bit so you can see a little bit better. So here it is so far. Here's where the armhole is sitting now, and so even if the yoke should grow in depth with blocking, and I fully expect that it will, I think the armhole should still end up in a good spot. I just think this is so beautiful. It conjures up images of a Victorian garden party for me. And even though I don't know where I would wear a sweater like this, and even though I suspect the colors would look better on a California blonde than an Arctic blonde like me, I don't care. This is a sweater I am knitting purely for pleasure. I think the pattern is exquisite. I think the yarns are exquisite, and I think that together they are exquisite. And I just cannot wait to see the finished product. I'm going to come in a little bit closer so you can see the lace in more detail. So yes, I just cannot wait to get back to work on this and see the finished results. And now there are little bits of mohair floating everywhere, which will surprise nobody who has ever knit with mohair. Ever since I began that sweater, my living room has been invaded by little miniature mohair dust bunnies. Go figure. I think that's it for all the knitting content. So now I'll try to briefly catch you up to date on what's been happening over the past couple of weeks. So on a happy note, we had a really nice family dinner here, not this past weekend, but the weekend before that. We got to break in our kitchen and put it through its trial run, and I'm happy to say that it passed with flying colors. Despite having an extra table set up, there seemed to be plenty of room. And at one point, there were 3 of us doing food prep along the long counter, and we weren't getting in each other's way at all. It was awesome. And then best of all, when all was said and done, most of the dishes went into the dishwasher, and there was minimal washing up to do afterwards. I have to say, I love having a dishwasher. And most of you are out there going, yeah, because I'm sure most of you have always had a dishwasher, but neither Cameron nor I have ever had one. We didn't have one growing up, and we've never had one in any of the places where we've lived. And I didn't really think I missed having one. That is until I got one. I did not fully appreciate how much I would fully appreciate having a dishwasher, but I do. It is just so awesome. You finish dinner, tidy up a little, wash a few things, the rest go into the dishwasher, and you know, every 2 or 3 days you run the machine, it does the work for you. Love it. And most of the time I don't even end up having to empty the dishwasher because it usually sits full overnight, and Cameron puts the dishes away in the morning. Gotta love that. So do I wish we'd had one sooner? Yeah, now that I have one, I do. But I'm just going to be grateful I have one now and fully appreciate it. Love it, love it, love it. On a less happy note, not long after that family dinner, I started to feel unwell. I had some symptoms that were sort of like cold symptoms, but not exactly like cold symptoms. And so it wasn't a complete surprise to test positive for COVID. All along, I kind of felt like it was some sort of virus, but I didn't necessarily think I had COVID. Thankfully, I wasn't seriously ill, about the same as when I had it last time, last July. I kind of gauge illnesses by how much I feel like knitting, and at no time did I ever feel too sick to knit, where I've had some colds in the past where I've felt too sick to knit. So that gives you an idea. It was actually because I didn't feel like doing much else. It was nice to have knitting and reading to kind of occupy my time and my mind rather than, lie there and feel sorry for myself. So yeah, while there were several, pretty bad days, it was nothing any worse than a bad cold. So grateful for that. Also grateful that even though I was unknowingly the most contagious when we had our family over for dinner, nobody else has gotten sick, and not even Cameron. So that's awesome. Once I knew I had COVID, I stayed away from him as much as possible, and then he was actually working out of town for the latter part of the week, so that helped. But he seems fine, so does everyone else, so that's really good. And then I was also grateful that by the time Mother's Day rolled around, I felt well enough and able to participate in the brunch that we had planned with our mom, my mom. She had come down to attend my new great niece's baptism, and my sisters and I had arranged a Sunday brunch out with the guys. And so we had a really nice time together. And then it turned out that my mom came and spent Monday here and then stayed overnight Monday night, and then she and my oldest sister drove her home yesterday. My sister did the driving, and she asked if I would come along for company on the way home. So we had a good drive up and back. We went out to the cabins to do a couple little things there, and I was glad for the opportunity to kind of check things out because I am heading back there on Friday. Cameron is going to be away again for a few days, but so I'm going to drive up with our son Matt and his wife Stephanie, and then Cameron is going to meet us there on Saturday night, and so that should be fun. Matt and I are going to attempt to get the water going. Neither of us have ever done it without other people around, and so cross fingers that it goes well. Sometimes we need to, well, not me because I'm not doing it, but sometimes we need to get in the creek to access the pipes that bring the water from the spring. Most of the way they flow in the creek because that's the path of least resistance and flows downhill obviously, and it's all gravity fed. So apparently the creek has come down quite a bit since my mom last saw it last week, and so that's a good thing, and hopefully it will continue to go down a little bit in case Matt needs to go in and fiddle with the lines. But I'm hoping he doesn't have to, and that everything proceeds smoothly. So cross fingers for that. The weather's supposed to be good for the first couple of days, but then it's going to change again, and I guess we're going to get some rain, which is not necessarily a bad thing because we just experienced a real heat wave, and things are kind of drying out already. Pardon me, I had to cough. I hope all of you mums out there had a wonderful Mother's Day on Sunday. I know it's not Mother's Day everywhere in the world, but it was here in Canada, and I know the United States for sure. Not sure about anywhere else. And then this coming weekend is a long weekend here in Canada. Monday is a federal holiday to celebrate Queen Victoria's birthday. And the May Day long weekend, Victoria Day long weekend, is sort of the unofficial kickoff to summer. It's when a lot of people open up their cabins and cottages and go camping for the first time, and that's what we're going to be doing too. Okay, it's time for something good. It's actually time for two good things. But very quickly, because Cameron just called and is on his way home from work, and he has ball tonight, so I gotta get going. First good thing. I knew about this last time I recorded, but I was not at liberty to discuss it. But now I can sing from the rooftops. Our younger son and his ex-girlfriend have reunited, and we could not be happier. We thought right from the beginning that she was the one, and we were really sad to see them break up. I am not sure what changed our son's mind, because it was his idea to end the relationship, but I'm very happy that something happened to change his mind, and that she was willing to get back together, and we just could not be happier. And the second thing is a phone app that I want to talk about. It's called the Cornell Lab Merlin Bird ID. And my sister brought this to our attention this past week, I guess it was. And one of the features of the app is that you can put your phone close to, well, it doesn't have to be close to a bird, but if you hear a bird making noise, you can put your microphone on, and the app listens, and it will tell you what the bird is. And I was a little bit skeptical, but then as I was trying it out, and I would have these different birds show up on my app, and then I'd have some of them land at my feeder. So it's not like they knew I could see, and it wasn't all the common birds either. I had a downy woodpecker show up one day, and sure enough, the microphone picked up its sound. And a couple of times I heard a great horned owl, and the first time I thought, oh, maybe it's just hearing the dogs bark at the kennel that's close to us. But the second time I actually heard the owl at the same time as the app identified it, and so it's like, this thing's very cool. So one thing I was anxious to try it on is a bird that I hear at night. I've heard it for years, have not been able to identify it. And I was very surprised to learn that it is a killdeer, which is a bird I always associate with like the shoreline. But I've since learned that they're actually very commonly found in farm fields and meadows, near airstrips, on golf courses. They'll even nest on a gravel roof. And they do make sounds both during the day and at night. And so mystery solved, just like that. It was so satisfying. And then yesterday when we went out to the cabins, I put my phone on, and boom, boom, boom. One time had within a couple of minutes, had 5 different birds pop up. And they are ones, all but one, that my mom has seen there before. And she's quite the birder, so I trust her. So yeah, very cool. If you're into birds and you're not familiar with this app, try it out. It's very cool, and it's free. All right, I better go and get dinner going. So I hope to talk to you again next week. Cross fingers, nothing comes up to mess up those plans. So take care until then. Thank you as always for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon. Bye for now.